All right. Well, we have a quorum with the four of us, so let's take all big decisions. Let's call the meeting to order at 6 p.m. on Thursday, September 11th, 2025. I would ask that Rachel note roll call. And I would ask Doug to lead us in the pledge. Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Sitting on my purse. There he is. We just started without you. All right. I don't have any announcements. I'm not sure if anybody else does. So we will note that Rebecca's not here because her husband passed. So we will hope that she's back with us again soon. All right, I would ask for a motion to approve the minutes of July 10th and August 7th. We have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. All right, I don't know of any appearances either in person or online. Well, that's good here. New business, an update on the Yahara Crossing Development Project.
Yeah, so I included a memo in packets, just as a general statement. Tonight there's no formal action we'll be taking tonight on any item, but the third item I'll be looking for a little bit of direction. So this is more of just an update since the last time we all met. Now I gotta stretch my eyes here too. We did get preliminary pricing. You all have seen at the last meeting the most recent set of design package for the building. Looks really good. The only remaining little tweaks that we're making right now are how the stairway interfaces with Main Street on that side of the building, and then still some things with the drive aisle, and then parking on the north side. So with that being the case, having it wrapped up to that degree, we put it to McGann Construction, who's our construction manager for the project, to kind of do a comparison with some of the finishes and material choices that our architects have kind of spec'd out there. And it was actually, I was very pleasantly surprised. It was within 5 or 6% of what we initially anticipated. I think I included in this memo a comparison here. So that may be instructive to just kind of look at. So there are additional costs beyond what is listed in here. These are more of the hard costs, quote unquote, as well as some of the contractor fees, and then an allocation for contingency. So on the right hand side here is the budget that we submitted last December for our tax credit application. That's why it's titled WIDA budget. And that overall number was, with the contingency and impact fees, 16.3 million. Again, there are site acquisition fees that aren't factored into this and a developer fee that's not factored into this. But for comparison sakes with just the hard costs of the design, wanted to kind of simplify it. So you can see in the left-hand column are all the costs that McGann put together based on our most current set of designs. So there are some things, it's not a one-to-one apples to apples comparison. There are some things that are included in that budget that we didn't include in ours just because we didn't know what we were going to have in the design itself. There are some things in ours that aren't in theirs because for one of several reasons, either they're included in a different line. For example, the general liability, or excuse me, I forget which one it was. One of these, maybe it was the performance bond. And then obviously the contingency and some of that other stuff was outside of the scope of their evaluation. So all things considered, we're in really good shape. There's a couple of outstanding items. One big one, which will impact this, and that's the potential relocation of the ATC, American Transmission Company power line that's on the
Somebody-
north side of the. I was going to ask you about that when you mentioned that earlier. It's on the north side of the site, so that is part of this update too. So I'll hold off on talking too much more about it until we get to that. But are there any questions on the budget piece? Back up
And,
here.
and the fees that are in there, or the cost, they came from the architect? Or,
No, so the right-hand column was our initial budget that we put together based on feedback both from McGann and another contractor and Beerbicker as well. The cost on the left was put together by McGann Construction, who is our construction manager, so a separate entity than the architect.
I'm sorry, I just want to make sure.
Mhm. And, you know, to be perfectly frank, what's most encouraging about that for me is that I feel like we have a really nice looking building. And to see that we're still within a degree of our budget is, I thought we were gonna splash it out of the water, but we haven't done that, so that's good. At least not yet.
Questions?
The only thing that's really rough carpentry.
Mhm.
So
Rough carpentry, yeah, so that was a marked difference, and that could very well be. I mean, that could be a number of things. It could have been split into a different category, right? So some of the costs that we had initially anticipated might be in a different line item here.
well, your general conditions are 800 the other way though, too.
Right, yep, so there are some definite differences in terms of the individual line item. And again, I think a lot of that just comes from, A, we didn't know what this building was even gonna look like from a materials or other standpoint. And then B, some of those costs might just be in other categories. But so we will, when we go to submit again for tax credits this December, we will base it off of a much more refined budget. And I think that that will go a long way for our application. So continuing on with a couple other points in the memo, we did have a phase one environmental assessment performed. That's essentially the consultant just walking the properties. There were some soil borings that we had as part of our geotech for the site buildability, which they also referenced. Obviously, the car wash was a former closed DNR site, so there was contamination there. I don't know. I think when they built it in the late 90s, early 2000s, and they cleaned it up to a degree that the DNR felt comfortable with. So there's a groundwater use restriction on it. We knew that going in, but that fact that even it is a closed site, as well as when we walked the site, there were still some petroleum stains on the interior of the building at the car wash, some fuel that was left on site. They recommended that we do a phase two environmental study, which I don't know if it's on here or not. Yeah, so that's the next bullet point too. So that'll have some additional costs. A phase two basically means they need to do some additional site investigation to determine the extent of any additional ground or soil contamination. So they need to delineate exactly where there is contaminated soil and then put together a plan for how we're gonna basically remove it from the site when we do our site work. So in order for them to do that properly, the car wash at a minimum and potentially part of the liquor store will need to be demolished so that we can accurately get under the soil and see what's there. So we applied for, maybe last week, applied for Wisconsin Economic Development Corporation, which is the same state organization that gave us the small business grant. They have a number of different programs. One is the site assessment grant, the SAG program. So we applied for a grant through that to basically fund our phase two environmental assessment activities. Those awards, I believe, are up to $150,000. And so we included site demolition on there as well, and we're hoping that we can use that to potentially demolish the residential properties as well. Regardless of how that grant shakes out, we're going to need to tear those buildings down to do this investigation, and we're going to need to do the investigation to keep moving forward with the project. So I'm going to start working on an RFP for demo activities on those buildings. And the hope is that we'll see at least the car wash and the liquor store come down this fall yet. So that's a change from what we had initially anticipated, but it seems like we will be actually starting site work this year, which is exciting.
You have a question?
Yeah, when is the SAG award?
It's a rolling thing.
No, when will it, oh, but
So
when will it be awarded?
it's a reimbursement basis.
Okay,
Mhm. So we have to demonstrate that we've incurred the costs, paid it, and then we get reimbursed. And there's not like a deadline for applying. As I said, it's a rolling basis. We had a preliminary conversation with Jason Scott, who's our regional rep over at WEDC, and he felt positively about it. The application's in their hands. I had a couple email questions from him today, but I like our chances. It's kind of an underutilized program, to be honest. So I think we have a good shot.
Do we know, maybe you know, Keith, what was on the site before the car wash? I can't remember.
So before the car wash, it was
Drive-in?
an auto, no, well, that was the liquor store, I think was a drive-in.
Liquor store with a drive-in, right?
It was an auto service place.
This is Bowen.
I don't know what that is, but
What, or was Bowen next to it?
Dwayne's Sigerslid, the Swede, that way,
Yeah.
that's,
Seriously?
yep. So they had an auto repair shop there.
Yeah, cause he had
Oh.
it way back, really in
Yeah.
downtown here. That's where he had the gas station,
Sure.
right next to the family restaurant here across from Rude's.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so that was the original source of the contamination, was not the car wash, it was the auto service. And I think there were underground storage tanks, petroleum tanks.
But those are removed.
They were removed, yep, and the site had a substantial amount of soil removed too, and they did remediation. We just need to determine what's still there, what residual is left. Where that's gonna sit on the site, if we need to remove it, or if it's gonna be under an area where there's a thick enough like concrete cap or under a building, those types of things. So it just needs a little bit more analysis.
That was what people did in the eighties and
Yeah,
seventies and eighties, cap it.
yep,
Not that anybody cares, but his wife lives in Jefferson Square.
there you go. I feel like everybody's lived at Jefferson Square at some
Go to
point.
our church at
Okay.
Christ Lutheran, yeah.
Okay.
The liquor
yeah.
store, was that, you said it was a drive-in?
Uh-huh.
That was not a gas station ever?
Not to my knowledge.
Oh, no,
Pizza place, it was
Right.
a
it's
drive-in,
a drive-in, yeah. Yep.
but it's always, yeah.
I think we have a pretty good idea of what's under there. I think the residential property has always been
The
residential.
sauce.
Pizza sauce, yes. But you know, with anything, you don't really know what you got until you open it up. So there is a risk there. If there is substantial remediation that's needed after we do this analysis, there's another grant that WEDC puts out. I can't remember. I think it might be the Brownfields grant, which we'll probably try to tap into as well. Then the last two items here on this, I mentioned the ATC line. We did submit to them to get us in the pipeline to start designing or engineering various options for relocating that. So while they have that underway, we're gonna pause on our design so that we feel comfortable with where we're at. But it doesn't really make sense for us to move forward until we know exactly what that relocation is gonna look like.
Have we-
So to ATC, yeah, we've had a preliminary conversation. We even, with our construction team, Veer Becker and the architects, Kaylor Slater, we put together a couple options for them to consider just to be proactive. What I'm hoping we end up with, and I think may be what we end up with, is instead of relocating the pole, and this would be a lot more cost effective. If we have to relocate that pole, just to give a sense of the scope, the ATC rep said we would have to also do something with 4 poles in that line. So it would be a substantial relocation. Is that we add a second pole to the south of that in the parking lot, perhaps on a little island in the parking lot, and then run the guy wires from either the existing pole or a replacement pole to that new pole, and keep it all on site. That's my hope. I'm sure that probably doesn't make sense in your mind visually, but if I could draw it
What
up.
about timeline? Something working with them? to do
Yeah. Well, fortunately, we have a bit of time before we actually move forward with any construction outside of the demo. So I'm gonna check in with them later this month to see if they've actually started any of the design work. The summer apparently for them is a busy season, they've communicated. Once right now we're in their queue. Once they start the engineering and design, it'll be a 3 to 4 month process to come to our set of options. And then depending on what the relocation looks like, if it is a more substantial relocation, that could be 8 to 9 months. So that would actually, while that sounds like a lot, that could align really well with our timeline because we're not going to be doing anything beyond the demo and some of this preliminary site work until late next summer, early fall. But it is a lengthy timeline. I think that's it for updates that I have on this.
Right? Discussion regarding 2026 budgets.
So these are both very preliminary budgets. I did reach out, we'll be actually meeting with Attic Angel. They have a new CFO. We'll be meeting with them, I think, next week. And then the hope is that at our next October meeting, we'll have a first look at a Jefferson Square budget, which will be interesting. Obviously, we'll be working closely with them on that. I pulled up the redevelopment budget. It's pretty bare bones, which, obviously we have the Yahara Crossing as our major project. Anticipate $1.5 million in quote unquote donations for the development still. Some of that could come from our sale of the properties in terms of 509. We'll talk about that in the next agenda item. But capitalizing some of these early construction costs. And then about $1.5 million of construction costs, closing costs into the early part of, or the later part of next year. The bulk of our construction costs are likely going to come in 2027. What's not shown on here is the loan that we had with the village. That's a $3.5 million construction loan. That wouldn't necessarily show up in our revenues or expenditures. That'd just be a liability that we would have. So I don't anticipate this changing much unless anybody has any comments or questions on that. I do have $7,500 in there for continued, mostly legal costs, honestly, with the loan program and the small business grant program as well.
Questions on the budget? Carol, anything you want to add?
Okay, and then moving on to Yahara River Housing, which was formerly our public housing budget. Obviously, some big changes here with us no longer managing 509. None of that's going to show up in our budget. So this Fund 940 is going to be entirely associated with the duplexes. So this is what we would anticipate for revenue from tenants over the course of the year. And our normal categories, it's going to be very much slimmed down. Most of these are, I would say, fairly conservative. I don't exactly know what our pilot is going to look like, the payment in lieu of taxes. And I think that's something that Carol and I are going to have to work with the assessor to figure out. It's an open question for both of us, I would say. But we should end the year in a positive. I am proposing $50,000 in reserves, and we'll touch on that in the next agenda item too. But that, I don't anticipate a whole ton of work at the duplexes. Most of our activities have historically been over at 509. And I'll say all this with the caveat that obviously we've talked about potentially looking to sell the duplexes as well. I did have a conversation with the Madison Area Community Land Trust 2 weeks ago, maybe. They have a funding source that they received from the county, specifically looking to acquire properties outside of the city of Madison proper. And so I did pitch the duplexes to them, and I think that would be another great fit. Their mission is very much affordable home ownership. I think they'd be awesome stewards of the properties, so there may be an avenue to potentially sell those to that group as well. So this budget may end up being a moot point, but good
And they were
to
interested.
look at it. Yeah, they were very interested. Mhm.
Well. Beauty of that is if they bought them, would they lease back to like the tenants that's are in there now?
Yeah. Yeah, like I said, I think they would be, assuming that we really want to not just divest of these and find a good partner in them, they would be a great partner. Not a partner in the sense that we would still be involved, but they have a similar mission, I would say, in terms of theirs is more geared towards home ownership. Obviously, we have tenants in there now, so we'd have to have a conversation about that and how that gets built into an agreement. But presumably after those tenants potentially move to our new facility, their ultimate goal would be to maintain those buildings for home ownership.
Question, Sheila, I didn't. You're good, okay. All right, well, that's fun. So this budget is looking at about $54,000 of cost. Is that how I'm understanding this? And $9,000 of income.
Yeah, so we would run positive at the year end by about 10 grand. So again, this may change slightly before we formally approve it. I'll probably bring this back for approval in November, alongside hopefully a final redevelopment budget and a final Jefferson Square budget as well. So no action tonight, just more informational or to get any input or suggestions from you all.
Questions? All right, well. That'll be exciting. I'll be interested to see what happens.
Sure.
All right, discussion regarding allocation of proceeds from a sale of 509.
Yeah, so this one is the one item on the agenda that I'd really welcome kind of a little bit more direction from you all. So as I kind of note in the memo, at the closing of the sale of 509, we had just over $160,000 in our Fund 940 account, which was the budget that was for managing 509, as well as the duplexes. Additionally, from the sale of the property, we netted, I don't see the number here, but it was something like, let's see, almost 1.6 million from the sale of that. Obviously, we've got a big project in the new development that we want to allocate those funds towards. But I think it also could potentially present an opportunity for us to do some different things with it, particularly the funds that we've accrued from managing 509 up until through July with the new revenue that we had with that. So we always knew that the budget for our housing portfolio, 509 and the duplexes this year, if we had retained ownership, the revenue stream was vastly different from what we've historically had. We didn't really talk about having a plan for that other than building up a reserve. Now that we no longer have that property to need a reserve for, my question to you all is there another way that we would like to use some of these funds? So I mentioned in the discussion of the budget for the duplexes, the idea of maintaining $50,000 as an operating reserve for the duplexes. That's one thing that I think I'd recommend. Carol, I'd welcome your opinion too on whether you think that's a suitable amount or not. Another option, which I think is interesting, is potentially buying out our lines of credit with our two partner banks for the revolving loan program. And what I mean is the way that that loan program is structured is the CDA has a line of credit at each bank. It's 7.5% interest that varies depending on what the prime interest rate is at any published point in time. And then we basically pass that on to our borrowers. So the recent loans we've made at 7 and 6.5%. So my thinking is potentially by buying out those lines of credit, we are essentially now the bank. We're capitalized as the lender, and in the future, we could explore offering lower interest rates to our borrowers to make it more attractive. I think at probably the first year or so of this program, one of the barriers that I heard from folks that I talked to in the community was, yes, it's a low interest rate, but prime -1 is still 7%. And that was hard for some folks to stomach at that point. You couldn't find it cheaper, to my knowledge, but still. And so if we had an option to lend at 4%, maybe that's something we could consider as well.
And that's interesting.
A couple other options here, and then I'll open it up for some input.
Before you.
Sure, yep. Mhm.
Yes. How much would we need to buy those out?
We have $50,000 lines of credit at each institution, so it'd be $100,000. And bear in mind that we do have loans extended right now. Those loans are between the CDA and the borrowers.
The only thing I would caution you on is not to offer an interest rate that's less than what we can get if we invest it.
Right.
But now you're losing money. So the 4% is a little low.
It was an example.
I know.
I didn't say 2%.
Just a quick question on that
Sure.
line of credit. Would that shift any liability to us that the credit unions would absorb now?
No, we still absorb liability right now. So if one of our borrowers defaults, we're still on the hook to the bank to repay that. That's why we try to make those agreements strongly worded. And if you recall, for the last couple ones, we had a couple additional provisions in there.
What are the two banks, DNB,
DNB did not opt to participate.
Wings?
Wings, formerly Settlers, and then Heartland Credit Union. So I would obviously, if this was something that you all wanted to consider, my take would be, because they were such good partners to help us get this program off, to still offer to involve them in the review process, if they so choose, and then to still acknowledge their participation as we dole out loans in the future.
I have mixed feelings about that, because we have, excuse
Bless you.
me. We have used them for the review
Mhm.
and, I don't want to lose that
Sure.
review. Can I have those tissues then? Thank you. I'm concerned that, as Doug's question, I mean, would we have liability? I don't know, but, having the bank involved just feels like a little bit of protection there. And maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it doesn't give us anything. But let's keep considering it, but I'm not quite there.
Sure. Yep, that makes sense. Yeah, their participation has been huge, right? Especially with some of these latter ones, to help us kind of work through them more and be hands-on in terms of connecting with the borrowers. And we literally sat down to kind of work through their financial performance for their
Yeah.
business. So I wouldn't want that to go away either. It's just a thought. A couple of the other ones here are to allocate funds for redevelopment operations, both this year and next year. So cover some costs this year associated with the small business grant. If you recall, we had to basically pass through 100% of those funds that we received to the businesses. So any legal review, those types of things were all our costs to bear. So I would propose allocating some of those funds to cover those costs, as well as if you think back to our budget, there was 7,500 in costs next year associated with the loan program, basically our redevelopment operations. The first year that I came on board here, we had capitalized our redevelopment activities by making a request of the village for $50,000, or actually it was more, it was like 80 something thousand, I think. I would like to get away from asking the village for money for redevelopment. And I think this is maybe our first year that we can self-fund our own redevelopment operations. I think there'll be more opportunities for that going forward. as we continue to develop the new building, get a developer fee with that, but that's one option that I put out there. And then the last one there, which is interesting as well, would be to potentially look at getting an appraisal done for Jefferson Square. I know at one point we talked about potentially looking to sell that entire development and the quote unquote business associated with that. I have had a very challenging time trying to put a valuation to that. So that may be something to explore, hiring a consultant to help us determine what a price would be for that. And likewise, a similar concept for determining a price for the duplexes, especially given the conversations that I've had recently with prospective buyers for the duplexes. I think that's less of a priority, but just things to consider. And then lastly, we will be looking for a certificate of deposit or some other higher yield account to put most of the funds from the sale of 509 into until we're ready to use it for construction of the new building. Is there anything you want to add to any of that?
You may want to consider, since we already do have some money from Jefferson Square invested in Prudential, I believe, you may want to just consider that option too. That way it's a little more accessible if you need it. But I mean, even with CDs, even though there's a set term, you can pull it out when you need it. You just lose some of the interest if you pull it out early. But yeah, there's some options there that you want to consider, but we certainly don't want to leave that much money just sitting in a low interest bank account.
So what are people thinking?
Well, do you want to split it up, like 2 or 3 different things, or you want to just put it all in one, or what?
The funds from the sale, whatever makes the most sense. I don't really have an opinion on it.
I like the idea of the operating reserve. And I don't know what a good amount would be. 50,000 sounds reasonable. I support that completely.
Okay.
Bank thing, yeah.
It was not too many years ago when one of the units over the duplex is flooded.
Yeah.
And the tenant that had been in there was not very clean. And it was a huge cost. I don't remember what we paid, but it was.
It wasn't that long ago either.
Mhm.
Pretty significant. And I was just thinking, where would those dollars come from at
Mhm.
this point in time?
Yeah, no, I think we need to have something there for sure. And we can work on figuring out what the right amount is. 50 was just a nice round number.
But I like the idea of having a little bit of our own money, investing a portion of it because we are going to need it for towards the new building. And as we layer those dollars in, still not leaving us totally strapped
Mhm.
till we can earn some more capital for redevelopment. Are these appraisal costs on the bottom, estimated cost to get the units appraised?
Yeah, so the appraisal for the duplexes, I feel fairly confident would be roughly 10 grand. For Jefferson Square, that was kind of a guess. So I'd have to do a little bit more digging if that was something that we wanted to explore.
Can I ask a clarification question? So are you saying that for 2 duplexes that are 4 units, they're going to be 5,000 each for an appraisal?
Um, so between the two properties, it would be 5,000 each. That would be my guess, or my estimate based on
I find that high.
high. So we had an appraisal done, which was a much more in-depth appraisal for the car wash, and that was about 10 grand.
That was what?
10 grand.
Really?
That was a little bit more in depth, obviously, because we were going through the that was we were going through the condemnation procedure.
Yeah.
So we wanted to have somebody on board who would, if we needed to go there, would be able to defend that in court. So that was a different scenario, but that is where I would think those would land. I hope I'm wrong. That'd be great.
So And how is the appraiser chosen?
We could RFP for it.
Okay.
Mhm.
And is that what you did like we did for the car wash?
I didn't do a formal RFP, but I did get quotes from a couple different appraisers. And then again, this one was one that was more qualified for specifically condemnation.
It is high.
Yeah, I think so too.
Okay, I will happily,
Won't cost that. It just
sure.
surprised me, but it still is considered a business appraisal. It's not been assessed regularly by the village, right?
No, it's been subject to a payment in lieu of taxes. So
Yeah.
it's a little bit
So
different.
it's almost starting from scratch to do the appraisal.
And again, I don't want us to get too hung up on that number. Mostly, I would like your feedback on these conceptually, and then if the number is $3, whatever it is, it is. But I just want to get feedback on whether these are things that you feel hold some value to us to potentially undertake.
The only reason why I questioned it is because our family had just recently done an appraisal on a single family home. And it
Sure.
was well under 1,000.
Okay, well
That's the only reason I even bring it up because I'm somewhat
Mine
taken
was,
back.
mine
okay.
about that too. On our house.
Yeah. Then
Would
maybe
you
we
like
stick
some
to
money set aside for redevelopment so you don't have to ask the village for money or what?
that.
Rotate my hat and put my other cap on. That's a good idea.
Yeah. Yeah, I'll defer to you all for that. I think it'd be good practice to start standing on our own feet.
So if we kept a little money out
Mhm.
to fund ourselves and we set aside some reserves so we could manage any turnover costs and so 35, 50, 85. What do we need for redevelopment?
I've got it, so next, I've got it just under 25,000.
So if you kept out 125 and then invested the rest, is that making sense or do you need more than that?
No, I mean, that's totally fine. We could take an approach which has whatever is the right amount for the reserves, for the duplexes, set that aside. I'll work with Carol to get a more refined number on the redevelopment operations so that that number's set aside and then put everything towards the new building. That would be a completely fine approach.
Do we need to be pulling any money for staffing? I mean,
So that is where I would potentially look to some of the reserves for 940. So right now, the way that we have the management agreement at 509 is all of Jay's costs, wages, benefits, the whole kit and caboodle is paid for through that development.
so we have to make sure we have enough money to fund Jay.
No, so he's being paid for through.
They're
the management
buying him,
fee of
I
the-
mean, they're paying for him as a contract.
Correct, yep.
Okay, I'm sorry.
But, certainly we could look at that a little bit closer. That's kind of it. Honestly, it's a little bit of a fluctuating target too, as so we have an intergovernmental agreement-ish / cost sharing between the CDA and the village. And we're going to have to amend that agreement. And with that, just because we've changed so much since the last time that was put in place, with that agreement, we pay an amount from our what used to be Jefferson Square and public housing paid to the village monthly for services. We've changed so much that Attic Angel now managing Jefferson Square, we still have some involvement there, but not the same degree. With 509 now gone, so that's going to change. So I think when we better understand that and where the funds to pay the village for those activities, which are now a little bit more minimal, come from, that may change some of these numbers too. And I mean, maybe that's a 940. I don't know. What do you think? I guess there's so much in flux with all the changes. that we need to kind of better figure out where that sits.
You're not asking for a vote tonight, but
No,
I'm sensing from this group that dispersing it a little bit, having some in reserve, some for operating, and then invest the rest, but it's liquid enough that we can get at it, is what we're saying makes sense. We might as well earn some money out of it if we can.
yep. Yeah, I think that's a very reasonable approach.
Yes,
And I guess what my suggestion is too, is when we get to the point where we're going to invest it, let's not wait too long. Let's get that going so that if we so we can maximize out whatever the term is. So that we don't have to maybe pull those funds back then and forego some interest.
Sure.
Or maybe consider staggering.
Mhm.
we have money still invested at DMV.
We do. So so let me just talk with you on your piece first. So I've had preliminary conversations with another financial institution about looking at what their rates are. So we're having those conversations already. It's not DMB. With the new project, we're going to need somebody to buy the tax credits. Typically, the entity that buys tax credits has a large federal liability because that's essentially offsetting their federal tax liability. And a lot of the times, those are financial institutions that have that. So I'm partially thinking wherever we look at for a CD, maybe it's DMB, maybe it's somewhere else. I would like to use that and potentially our deposits as a carrot to hopefully get somebody to invest in purchasing our tax credits as well. So just throwing that out there.
I think that's a good idea. And how much is in DMB right now?
I
Do you
think we
know?
have like four plus million, I would say.
And does that stay with us? Does it belong to the CDA or does any of that go back to HUD?
No, those are all of our funds. A lot of that is associated with Jefferson Square. So the buyout reserve, when we pay people out, is 2.5-ish million, something like that. So that's a big chunk of it. Obviously, the sale of 509, 1.5 will be a new. We have substantial deposits, and I think that could be a strong negotiating chip for us to try to hopefully find a partner for the tax credits.
You have it in CDs? We have it in.
We don't have any. No, and we didn't have the prudential statement on here. That's kind of our larger investment account, and that's actually ticked up of late, which was good. I think it's at 1.2, something like that. So this is good. I kind of have a good sense of the direction and a good sense of the items that I think maybe we'll just leave off for now. I think at the October meeting, we'll have Jefferson Square look at that budget, and then maybe Carol and I can work together and put together a proposal on some of these with a little bit more concrete numbers.
So everyone, Sheila, I didn't hear from you, but are you good with,
Yes, I am good with that for sure.
okay. All right. Are you, everybody here is comfortable? Okay. Keith and I were just over here going, we were here in the days when, well, so was Doug.
Doug was too.
We were way in the hole.
Yeah.
We had no money at all. So this is,
It changed.
this is very nice. Right. Anything else you want from us on that?
No, that's perfect.
Thank you. That was very helpful information too.
Good.
All right, reports. Jefferson Square financial update.
We had June and July in there. Honestly, looking through these, I don't really have anything of note. I can talk more outside of the financial statements when we get to the update piece. I do have a couple things to pass on from Attic Angel. They've from a financial perspective, they've been doing a really good job managing.
Yeah, as we've seen in the past, we are running above what we were budgeting at this point in time. So things are still looking strong. I did talk to them about the, the unit replacement costs weren't coming through, and I kept warning you guys. I know it looks really good, but as soon as we start seeing those costs come through, it's going to come back down. Well, they said costs were lower than expected. So even though we will start to see some of those costs come through, they aren't as much as what we had budgeted for that expense. So they're still running more of a profit than we had anticipated at this point in the year. Yeah, it's looking good.
Good.
Yep.
Mhm.
Any questions on that, on the Jefferson Square report? All right, Yahara River Housing Update.
I think we have Fund 920 in there too. I apologize for that. But we've got the June 940 in there. This was back when we still owned the building. So
Mhm.
I think we'll see one more statement from it from July, and then that'll be it for 509. But I mean, exactly what you said, Jane, from having come to see this thing in the red for so many years, to see it doing really well is a nice change.
It's very nice. Good work, you guys. I mean, that required a lot of hard staff work and we appreciate it.
Sure. Well, unfortunately, now we got to let it go. So,
That's a
Um,
good thing too.
the only thing I'll point out, there are a couple of journal entries just to recategorize things in our internal accounts. Labor and benefits, you'll see hit in 120 and 158, and there's a corresponding journal entry down here. So you see that negative. And then the other ones were admin services and admin services contracted. We had some things miscoded there, so we just switched those as well.
Okay. Questions on any of this? No. Boy, this is an easy group. Good thing. And then update on housing units.
So we don't have a slide. Duplexes are all full. 509 is what it is, so I won't even go there. That's no longer ours. I do have some notes from Jefferson Square. At this time, everything is spoken for, at least financially. I think there's a couple units, one that hasn't been moved into yet, but there's a reservation on it,
Including the barn.
including the barn. Yep, that was great. They did receive notice that two other units, 712 to Forest Street and 711 Jefferson Court, will be moving out. The families of those are working to get all the stuff out by the end of September. And then they'll start the renovations on those. There's a strong wait list, so I'm sure that those will go fairly quickly as well. There's no barns by either of those. That helps. On the management side of things, so Jay and I attended the resident meeting, I want to say in July. There were some rumblings about use of the clubhouse and things like that. We had a really good conversation. The office that historically we used and now Attic Angel uses will be converted to resident storage. Previously, we had residents, they were allowed access to the shop area there in the garage to do little projects and things like that. It was conflicting with Cam, who's their their maintenance guy. It was conflicting with his work. So in order to just keep things clean and separate the resident space from the management space, they're kind of carving out some storage space for residents in the clubhouse in a different location. So that'll be interesting. They've been starting to solicit landscape bids. Our current contract with Bramish is up next spring in 2026. So they're gonna RFP for that and get some new bids in there. Obviously, he can still bid as well. He was really good price wise, hit or miss sometimes on the landscaping itself. There's been chipmunks in people's units that they've been working through, but all in all, they seem to be addressing a lot of these issues and doing a good job.
Chipmunks right in the units is a.
Yeah, that was,
It's not good.
no, that wasn't a good one. So they were working to, and I fielded a few calls from the resident on that one. They were working to address, there's a hole and some other issues that were going on. I'm imagining that they have that plugged up by now. That's all I have from housing updates.
Just something I brought up a while back about people that passed away. We doing anything with that?
We are, yep,
No, Shirley Stoltenberg just died too.
yep, we are sending cards on behalf of the CDA. So, yeah.
Good.
Not a fun activity, but I think it's nice to be able to do
Right.
that. Rachel's the one coordinating that, so kudos to her.
Thank you, Rachel. All right, in the redevelopment division.
Most of the activity here is associated with the development project. Sorry, I'm pulling it up here. My goodness. I think I might actually need glasses. So we've made several relocation payments to tenants, as well as the final relocation payment to DeForest Liquor for the removal of their personal property. And then we've also had some costs incurred for the design work for the new building as well. You will see some revenue there. I think I mentioned this last time. That's tenant revenue coming from the tenants at 109 West North. Just as an aside for that, we've had 2 folks over there find new spots, so they moved out already. And then I think there's at least 2 more who are imminently moving out. And then I think there's only 1 more after that. So that building is almost vacated as well. Or those buildings, excuse me.
We didn't tell them they had to be out by September, did we, or did we?
No, so they have until the end of October.
Okay,
But at that point, they need to be out. And we've been working, Beerbooker's acting as a consultant for us with that, interfacing with DOR, or excuse me, DOA, to help us make sure we're doing it appropriately according to statute. So far, it's been smooth.
great. Great. Questions on the redevelopment budget? Okay. And let's continue. So any other business to come before this body? Other than to thank you guys are doing a good job, all of you. Thank you. Carol, thank you. I remember when we brought this to you, you were like, yeah, I'm not sure I want this. Yeah. Thank you. Next meeting is October 9th. And I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'll second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
I.
Opposed? Motion carries. We will adjourn at 6:53 PM. 53 minutes. That's pretty good, guys. Good work.
Thanks, everybody.
Oak Springs is